Welcome, everyone. It's our Halloween
Ooh.
discussion for what's scary in recruiting for 2025. So I'm just going to slowly let people come in for the next couple minutes, and we all tried to dress up in our best Halloween costumes and see what we could bring to the table.
Ain't no trying, Bill. This is it. This is the
This
best
is
I
it.
got.
That's you, Fred.
This is
Full
about
effort.
Yeah,
it. I like my shirt though.
I do like that.
Yeah.
That gets it done.
The Indeed people love it. It gets it done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have Ted Lasso. So we're at 101. Give one more second for people to come on in, and then we'll kind of be off and running. It's
Your kids still trick or treat, Bill?
I have one that is going to trick or treat. The rest have become too cool
Too
to
cool.
engage in that activity. But what's really weird is, for those of you geographically, I live in New Hampshire, about an hour north of Boston. It is going to break 80 degrees here today.
Halloween
And
heat
so
stroke. News at
I
11.
know I think it's great because there was a dozen, well, it's not great, but it's great for my daughter. There was a dozen Halloween costumes. She came downstairs and I went, and I used it. It'll be too cold as to So now I'm gonna have to come up with a new strategy.
Oh, so it
So, all
wasn't
right.
sexy. It was like a bear costume or something
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
heavy. Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to get her dressed up
Whenever you
as,
hear dad, daughter, and no, you're not wearing that, it's usually, skimpy, not.
yeah. Yeah.
It's,
None of that was going to
it's a
happen.
lion.
So,
Yeah.
well, awesome. Well, I want to get us rolling. I'm glad that we have everyone here, and the goal for this discussion forum was really just to spend some time talking about what's scary in recruiting in 2025. And I invited Ben Eubanks and Joel Cheesman to join us because I think they bring a really interesting perspective to what's happening in the market. So just to give you a little bit of I've already introduced you Ben. He's a chief research officer from Lighthouse Research and Advisory. And Joel Cheesman is the co-host to the ever famous Chad and Cheese podcast. No,
Infamous. You meant to say infamous, I think.
infamous
Yeah.
podcast. Oops, going the wrong way here. So this is what happens when they give me pain meds. So my agenda for today, and what I wanted to focus on was just if anyone else wanted to wear a Halloween costume, definitely be in the running. Two, I wanted to get the thoughts. Yeah, I am. Mike, I ain't going. I definitely wanted to get a discussion or thoughts from Ben and Joel and just on 2025, really in some of the key areas that are nebulous in their perspective. We're still learning and technology is still growing. And then I thought from that we could discuss some of the key topics that are important to everybody on the call. And then we could have a final thoughts and pick a costume winner to see who pulled it out. But I'm going to take this off because, quite frankly, Batman didn't wear glasses
Ooh.
and I can't see. So now I'm back to my
Ooh.
normal presence and excited to get going. So if you guys want to take a minute, just introduce yourself to some of the people on the call. And then what I wanted to really dig into was when we think about 2025, lots of stuff going on. But where are some of the areas that people have concerns from your understanding? And then we can kind of talk about it as a group if they relate to some of the things that the folks here are concerned about. So, uh, Joel, I got to let you go first because that wig just wins. I love it.
You like the wig?
I do.
God cheated me and didn't give me it. Maybe cheated Chad more, if you know Chad. So in introduction, I'm 25 plus years in the space. Started with one of the early job boards in the 90s and have worked my way through a variety of, I guess, media, solopreneur, vendor side work along the way. Some of the old timers might remember Cheesehead, which was a blog that I used to drop bombs on people back in the day, which was a lot of fun. But most notably here recently, I'm headed into year 8 of the Chad and Cheese podcast. If you don't know the Chad and Cheese podcast, It's a podcast I host with Chad Sowash, another middle-aged angry white guy. We talk about the industry. I guess you could call it like TMZ meets TechCrunch with a sports radio attitude about what's going on in our industry. And if you'd like to listen, you can search for it on any podcast platform of choice or head to chadcheese.com. Happy Halloween.
All right. Goodness. I don't want to follow him again, Bill. So don't let me do that again. That's always hard. So, hey everybody, Ben Eubanks. I'm the Chief Research Officer for Lighthouse Research and Advisory. I'm a research nerd. I spend my days trying to understand the tools and technologies that leaders like you need to help you get your work done every single day, hiring, screening, finding the right talent, as well as producing research on what the market is, what's happening in the market. So, why do candidates ghost employers? What are some of the things employers are looking to solve as challenges this year? All those kind of things we gather in the data. And then I turn that back around to all of you in creative and interesting and fun ways to make it relevant, to make it tangible, and to help you know what to do next. So it's a ton of fun. Enjoy it thoroughly. And I got my start in recruiting Black Hawk helicopter instructor pilots. So now I'm talking about, sharing about, helping educate on that. But still go back to my roots sometimes and appreciate the hands-on difficulty of what you're all doing every day.
Can you give us a Ted Lasso impression?
I don't really believe in ghosts, but I think it's important that ghosts believe in themselves.
That was good. That was good. All right.
Nicely
All right,
done.
Bill.
Nicely done.
There we go.
Well, so where I thought might be a great place to start, and really I'll question out whoever wants to answer first, because I don't want to make Bob follow Joel again. But really the things I wanted to talk about are, what are some of the biggest trends that you see evolving next year out of what we're doing? I mean, obviously AI is a term, but more importantly, where do you see it really gaining traction? Because there's a number of places in the journey of a candidate that it can reside. What are some of the potential challenges we're going to face in whatever that is, and maybe some interesting surprises to look for in the ecosystem of the TA Tech world? So that was kind of a three-part question I was thinking of. I will let either one of you go first.
I'll throw a couple things out there real quick. If you're good with that.
Perfect.
So AI is something I always love talking about. I'm currently writing the third edition of the book, AI in HR, that talks about it across AI and recruiting and all the other applications there, because it's something that so people want to hear about, want to know more about. Yes, AI is going to be a conversation, but I'm increasingly seeing it shifting away from the AI as this exciting solution to all your problems, and it's going to make sure your kids' teeth are brushed, and it's going to cut your grass too. Like, we've been sold all this hype, and in the research, we're seeing so many employers telling us that this stuff is overhyped to absurdity. And so we're really getting back to what I'm excited about, which is the practical: what problems is it going to solve? How is it going to help you? What sort of impact is it going to have? If it's this really cool thing, but it doesn't add any measurable impact to the candidate experience or to your throughput as a recruiting team, then it's a waste of time. Honestly, that's my take on that anyway. One of the other things I'll share is sort of bright spot. There's been like this rocky thing with recruiting in the last couple of years. It was like hot, and then it was sort of on the rocks for a bit. And I got some data from the team over at Lightcast last month, because I was presenting at a conference, and the demand for recruiters, job postings for recruiters, are up almost 20% over the last year. And so that usually is a sign that things are coming back, things are returning to some sense of normalcy. So that's a bright spot that I'm hoping continues into the coming year. And Joel, I'll let you chime in there, and then we can kick around some of the challenges, surprises, other stuff as well.
Yeah, I'll probably take a little bit of an opposing view on don't believe the hype. I'm buying into it to certainly a certain degree. I mean, I think, a short history of this is pandemic happens, money's free, party time, hire everybody, overhire so your competition doesn't get to hire them. And then the party was over and the hangover started, and people realized, well, we don't need this many people. Things are slowing down. Maybe we should think about resizing. And then Elon comes along and drops 44 billion for Twitter and says, 80% of you be gone. And everyone freaked out, but things were kind of okay after some initial bumps. The year of efficiency was born, and you saw Meta cut heads. You saw every tech company of any stature start cutting people. And by and large, stock prices went up, shareholders were rewarded, the business didn't fall apart, and things were sort of stabilized. Fast forward to the last 6 months, we got Amazon with Amazon Q saying we're saving $260 million because we're not coding as much. We don't need as many developers. Hey, developer, you might want to think about getting into a new line of work. We got Google coming out this week with their earnings report saying 25% of all the new code at Google is automated. Well, that says to me like Google doesn't need as many engineers either, or maybe there's enough new products because they're getting their ass kicked in AI that they can start shifting people over to stuff and start competing with OpenAI. And as my experience tells me, when the big boys start doing stuff, it starts trickling down to the tier 2, the tier 3, and then the small businesses. And by the way, Amazon is pretty good at productizing shit. AWS was an offshoot of the business of Amazon. What if Amazon IQ gets productized, boxed up, and says, hey, company, for a low monthly fee, you can have Amazon Q and get rid of all your developers too. So I am more fearful of it than maybe Ben is. I'm also convinced that there's not a company in the country who's not having the conversation. How do we do more of the stuff that we do with fewer people? Whether that's kiosks at McDonald's or AI doing coding or sourcing, automated sort, like everyone's trying to figure out how to do more with fewer people, and that's going to like have an impact on recruiting and how many people are hired and what they do and what do we do with people we have. So I think it's chaos. I think it's dogs and cats living together. It's a very appropriate conversation for a Halloween show, but I'm a little less optimistic than Ben is. I'm glad that he has a much sunnier demeanor. Very Ted Lasso. Very Ted Lasso.
I take my sunshine with me wherever I go, Joel.
Yeah,
so there's
good.
that. One of the things I wanted to sort of kick at you a little bit here, we're talking to companies that are saying that we saw this again. You mentioned the pandemic, like this sort of roller coaster ride. We saw a lot of companies that when they scaled down, like as we're scaling back up, if we are scaling back up, we don't want nearly as many people, right? And so you talked about that a little bit. For the people here listening in, what is your recommendation to them? Suck it up. Find another company that will invest in it. How should they approach that? Because I'd love to hear your take on it.
You want to hear my take on what they should do in regards to what?
I just love to hear from you what you think I'm just pitching. It's funny. You run a podcast and I run one, and I love getting a chance to put someone on the other side of the microphone once in a while.
Yeah,
for better or for worse.
And on a side note, if as we're talking about this, if there's anyone who has any specific questions or anything we mentioned you want to stop and dig in on, just throw it in chat. I'll make sure to see it. But definitely, yeah, Joel, we can. I think Ben's got a good start point, but definitely want to hear your thoughts there.
Well, maybe I misunderstood the question. So your question is what?
So we're do more with less. It's what the mandate that's out there. This almost always when that's mentioned, it's like, well, that's all you can do. And I talk to some companies that are like, yeah, but we're able to get people. We're able to get additional budget. We're able to bring people on. And I didn't know if you had a position on that, like, hey, here's a recommendation, here's a piece of advice, or hey, do more with less. Here's some recruiting areas where you can automate the heck out of it and get Amazon Q benefits in your function, essentially.
I mean, I think maybe my viewpoint is more macro, long term. I mean, what I see is just an overwhelming sense of the year of efficiency, soldiers on. How do we do more with less? How does technology have more impact? We're fortunate in America that the economy is still very good, particularly compared to the rest of the world. And I don't know, we don't have to talk Europe, but they're having their own issues with a lot of things that are going on. But I think a reaction it was like, let's fire everybody, pandemic over, money, inflation, and then it's, oh shit, we did too much, let's bring it back. So I don't know how much of this is a longer term attitude or how much of it is like, oh shit, Q3 was really good, the economy is okay, we're not going to hell, we need to go back to some sort of a stability or stabilization in who we hire. But I just think if you look at the long term of, if we're talking 5 years from now, it'll be a much different conversation than it is today. So we could both be right. Both of us could be totally correct in
Yeah.
that we are hiring more people. But all I see is in the news and conversations anecdotally for me, everyone is figuring out how do we do the things, how do we produce what we do and sell what we do with a much smaller headcount.
I'm
I
with
mean,
you on that.
example is we talked to GM. We got an AI series, Sessions AI, if you want to check it out. But we talked to GM. In GM, before they launched automation and chatbots and conversational AI, they had 200 schedulers, 200 people who all they did was schedule and reschedule and post whatever interviews. When they brought in the technology that did that automatically, 200 people lost their job. Now that's one very small, story and anecdote, but if that's happening at GM, that's happening at other places, and that's going to start adding up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've actually asked the question of some of the companies that have the data on the bigger labor market, like are schedulers within TA, the people who are doing all that logistical piece of it, are those people going away? And they don't have the data, but I have stories like that, just like that keep coming up where these big companies are doing it for sure. That's the number one area that companies are automating. And so it has to be happening, even if it's not out there in the news, because no one wants to be saying on the HR side of the business, oh yeah, we're getting rid of all these people. It's really cool to do it when you're Amazon and you can sell it to somebody. When you're on the recruiting side, it's really hard to do that unless you're a staffing vendor talking about the benefits of going to them or something else, I would imagine.
Sure. And I'm sure the story at staffing companies is much different than the story at direct employers and what the two issues there for sure.
For sure.
What else, Bill? More doom and gloom? You want some more trends that I see that suck?
No, I think Jerry, I'm glad you asked
that. I got 6 of them, baby. I came with ammo.
Yeah, no. Jerry asked a question that I was just thinking. I was just going to mention, which is with the U.S. presidential election coming up.
Yep.
Traditionally, I believe
that only took 18 minutes. I'm surprised it took that long.
I know. Well, we're trying to pace it. We didn't want it to be that scary of a podcast. But traditionally, election years have a positive impact on the economy and hiring. Do you think that that's going to be a continuation? Is that going to re-happen next year? We're going to continue this forward momentum, or is there a potential? I guess there is a potential for some pandemonium that just rails kind of where people's thoughts and focus are at, without getting too political.
I love that Jerry says, answer that question without being political. I mean, objectively speaking, you can say that Kamala is probably more of where we've been the previous 3.5, 4 years. Whether you like that or not, I think it's fair to say not much is going to change. I think Trump, I think shit will change with Trump. I think it's going to be tariffs galore. I think it's going to be bombast, like a little bit of. Remember the days when Trump would tweet about a company and they'd lose 5% of their market share overnight? I mean, I think we kind of got numb to that after a while, but we're going to get reacquainted with stuff like that. I worry a lot. I worry more about geopolitics than I do American politics. Like, we could do a whole show on my opinion on Ukraine, Israel, North Korea, China being in a unified offensive against the West and the things that we sort of hold dear, and disrupting the dollar and kicking us out of parts of the world. I think that has a much broader fear factor for me than what is going to happen in the presidential election. I mean, the CEO of Blackstone went on CNBC this week and said, it doesn't really matter who gets to be president. Not much is really going to change because you still have Congress, you still have the Supreme Court. Like,
right.
There's not going to be a nuclear bomb drop on Paris if either president, whoever gets to be president. However, if the war escalates, all of this stuff means nothing if the world is at war with each other. So that worries me much more than the local or our country's political question.
Well, I applaud your ability to take it from like a PG to a PG-13 show. That was powerful.
I'm Gen X, baby. The day after. This is what I grew up with. So
Awesome. Well,
Cold War, nuclear shit, bring it on.
so I'm curious, we talked a lot, or we just spent a couple minutes on companies finding ways to do more without bringing the people back to the equation. So I'm curious from the members out there, who's dealing with that, and how. I mean, obviously who, but the question that I'm curious of is, as we are given these mandates, do something that seems challenging because of the resources that we're able to do it with. How are you approaching those challenges? So is there anyone on the call that can identify with that and share a little bit of their background?
We should have handed out candy before the webinar.
I know, but it's good to know that everybody's getting all the resources they need for 2025. I would think, wasn't sure, but I thought somebody might not have all of it, but no, I'm curious. Has anyone identified a shift from rehiring to looking at technology to AI to take on some of these tasks? I mean, that's one of the things we've been concerned about, right? AI is going to come in and take these jobs. But the other side, I think we're being somewhat put in a position to use AI to take tasks and automate and to move things in an automated process rather than doing them in a manual way. So how are people experiencing that?
I can just talk a little bit. We actually talked about it
Sure.
at lunch today with HR people in our admissions team, and they're actually embracing AI as a way to help them do a task in a shorter amount of time on certain kind of letters that they're writing for students, for example. So things that aren't requiring them to put 100% of just themselves in the letter. And they're embracing it. So, and I know it's something we use in HR to help a little bit cut down on some of the writing that we do.
Yeah, I would see that being a great area for AI to help in some of the automated responses. Anyone else?
I know I mentioned in the chat, but LinkedIn's Talent Connect was just this week, and like the big focus was AI. And if you're not already doing, it's kind of an evaluation of where you're at on the spectrum, right? What are you using AI for? Are you using it for Boolean search strings, right? Where you don't have to get an error certification, you don't have to certifications anymore. You just put it into Copilot and you get a 20 operator search field. Like, we're doing that. I think that puts you above a lot of other people, and it's such a simple thing. It's so simple to specify the industry you're looking for. You don't have to do all the research, hours of research. What competitor do I have in this market? It'll do it all for you, and it's there in seconds. So I think one of the things we were talking about was getting away from thinking about it using a calculator on a math test in school, right? Like, we're big boys and girls, right? We're out of that world. We have it at our fingertips. So just fucking use it, because everyone else around you who's going to be successful will if you don't. And just seeing how you can bake that into your job descriptions, right? Have AI rewrite your job descriptions. Read through it, though. If you don't like it, tell it a change to make, right? Have it help with your scheduling, right? Have it review your hiring manager's schedules and find a time that they probably are less likely to decline. There's so much around that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good point.
Call me snarky, but it feels so seductive when I hear recruiters talk about how nice it is to have all these services and do these things for you without realizing, like, it might be slowly driving the knife in my back as it, smiles and recruits and does my job for me. It just, when I listen to it, I just think, man, are we just slowly diving into the spider web, and then one day we're just going to get the blood sucked out of us?
And I think the position's evolving, right? Like, we've seen it over the years become more transactional, less transactional. And I think this takes some of the transactional parts out of it and has us, we've got a team of talent acquisition partners. So what does that mean, right? Like, can we, in the flashy name, we're all recruiters, right? But can we partner more and be more proactive than reactive and take some of the administrative stuff off the plate?
Let me ask you this, Chris. 5 years from now, are there more recruiters or less recruiters?
Oh, less for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But developers too. Are there less develop? Oh, yeah, yeah. They were.
That's my whole point. We're
Yeah.
trying to live in a world with fewer people doing less stuff, and
Well,
that's a little scary.
I don't know. I think that you have to just like, things change in every area over time. Just because you're going to have less recruiters doesn't mean that there's people with specialized skills in those spaces that are not super relevant for something else that we don't need right now, that we're going to need. So
Yeah.
I have my coordinator who is doing massive amounts of coordination, but she's incredibly creative. She's great with detail orientation. We have tons of really, really customized templating and what we send out to candidates. And that part of her world takes up much more in the coordinating because I can subsidize that doing other things. And now I can move her into a position that's more aligned to like candidate engagement and what that means for an employee coming into their first 30-day, because they're really still in the TA bucket in their first 30 days. They don't really know the company, but they know us. So there's all these other areas that we can then dig into, and a lot of recruiters have those skills. They're just needing to be utilized in a different way.
Yes.
So,
And that's so I've recently listened to a couple people speak about AI as we go into the next 24, 36 months, and it creating a newer skill set in a lot of different roles. So while you may be a recruiter today, the recruiter tomorrow has a very different skill set because of the technology and the tools that are available, the interaction with the hiring manager, the departure of tasks and who does what. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, as those things evaluate. Not always 100% sure what they're going to look like, but I definitely see the overall trend heading towards a more enabled individual person with more technology at their disposal.
So I'm trying to juxtapose this with some of the data that came out. There was a study published yesterday that says that people using tools like ChatGPT are less creative. They've actually started being able to prove the fact that using these things reduces your creativity, reduces your ability to solve problems. And how many of us, when we're recruiting day to day, have to see a situation, see a problem we've not seen before? And is using this stuff on a daily basis going to make us miss the boat, miss that mark next time that comes up? That's what concerns me broadly. There's some data that came out from Harvard. They've done an experiment with recruiters using AI, and they found that the recruiters using what they called strong AI, to be very predictive, they were much more likely to just like go with it. Like you were saying, Joel, like just go with it. You've got this. And then it ended up making poor hiring decisions, poor recommendations for candidates. They were not a good fit. But the ones who were using an AI that was weak, low prediction, sort of, hey, here's your short list, but you need to go in there as the expert, Chris, Casey, Peter, you need to go in there as the expert and figure out which ones you need to pick. Those people ended up making better choices because they weren't just handing it off. They weren't outsourcing their brains to AI. And that's the part that our brains are wired to be lazy. They're wired to ignore things that don't matter, that we think don't matter in the moment. And some of those things that we think are just transactional routine parts of recruiting may be things that are actually essential in the bigger picture. And it's a hard place to know exactly where that lies, but that's the thing that I'm concerned with long term.
Yeah. Couple really great observations in chat. One, and Samin, I agree with you that I think TA has the ability to have a more strategic view for the company with AI coming in place. And it is when you back out calling, scheduling, recruiting, all the things that go along with it, you do get the ability to be more strategic and to focus more strategically on what the company's needs are. So I think that's a great observation. I also think as you're talking about some of the ways that people expand their skill set, I think in anything we do, we need to be embracing AI because we need to be aware of how it's going to enable people to do more. You have to have an AI skill set. It needs to be, for me, just my humble opinion, it needs to be an area I'm thinking about. How do I utilize this in the most effective manner?
And I think go back to Casey's example, Bill. I think it's really convenient to just say, well, people who are doing this, we can just shift them in over to this. And I think you can do that with some people. I mean, I'll give you a story about a job board back in the day, and they had a bunch of salespeople who sold job postings. Pretty simple transactional sale. As job postings and all that, as the market dried up, they tried to take all these salespeople who sold job postings into selling things like high tech marketing tools like SEO and social media. And the salesperson who was really good about smile and dial, sell job postings, move on to the next one, was not equipped to sell something like search engine optimization. So I think it's a little optimistic to just say, hey, this bucket of people, we can just move them over here to something more probably involved or more, something that's more higher skilled than what they were doing before. I think it's real easy to just say, throw them over here, we'll keep them in, and they'll do something else. I think that's optimistic in most cases.
I think there's
Yes.
definitely people that won't, will lose recruiters in that sense. My point with that is that there will be other jobs that don't exist right now that people will be able to fill. And then recruiters, as we know them today, will have to find other skill sets. But it's not like there's an end to the job and other things that need to be done. There's just different people that will fill that.
Yeah. You're talking about adaptation, right? People will have to adapt, and we've had to do that as human beings our entire existence. I think what's really unique about today is, when the car came along, we had buggies and then cars and buggies together, and that switch from horse and buggy to car took decades to happen. And historically, when changes happen, there's time to sort of adapt and evolve and like get used to it. Keep in mind, ChatGPT is like 2 years old. I mean, the changes that we've seen in a 24-month period is pretty insane. And to think about that's just going to get faster and faster as these changes go along. I don't know if a lot of human beings are going to be able to keep up with a lot of the changes and new jobs and new opportunities that come along. I think that's a really tough challenge for government, education, and corporations to figure out.
I think you nailed one thing to me that I think is going to affect that is the speed in which people can change, like the speed of change today compared to what it was 24, 36 months ago is astronomically faster. So the ability for some people to keep up with that is definitely a challenge. Crystal, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Thank you. I totally agree with you, and the speed at which it's changing is getting faster. I think that's where our skills, through K through 12 or things like that, really have to focus on grit and the ability to learn things on your own and to explore learning and not always having to be told exactly what to do, that type of critical thinking. I think those are the skills that we need to lean into, since the shift is something that's going to be here and faster.
Crystal,
Yeah,
are you
definitely.
opposed to participation trophies?
No.
No, you
I
sound
like
like you should be.
trophies.
Talking about grit.
I thought you were giving me a trophy for participating.
No, I said, are you in favor? She's staying down
Yes.
with it, make it tough on the kids again. They're going to need to be adaptive in the future.
Exactly. That's where they need to figure out how to do that. Yeah.
I agree on that front. And, it's interesting sometimes as a father of four to watch and see how stuck my kids can get on a simple problem that I can see 5 ways around, yet because they're just thinking in a linear path. I need to do A, B, and C. Oh, I can't do C, so I'm done. There's no workaround with it. And so that critical thinking, and I think there's a lot of studies to support it, is a serious task or a serious skill set that people need to cultivate in themselves personally.
If only they had the attention to figure it out, because none of them can focus for more than 5 seconds on anything.
Yes, that is very true. It's the speed in which my daughter can rip through Instagram blows my mind sometimes. Like, did you even see what that picture was? So, but if it's not Taylor Swift, she's not stopping. So she's just going. The thumb's flying. So when you look at I think it's interesting when you were talking about the upskilling. One of the things that I've always thought happened is that employers at one point in time made a serious mistake. They stopped investing in their people, right? There was a point in time where companies, I think, stepped back on the upskilling and focusing, and it's become an important part of the brand of a company now when people are evaluating new jobs. What are you going to invest back in me? I think we can see that across a number of applicants and job types. Is that something that you feel is what I've heard is that that's an area where people are putting a lot more effort into building out the way an organization is going to support their employees? Have you guys had a lot of that being part of the recruiting process in conversations with hires and how you're explaining it to them now?
I think it becomes an issue of you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, right? Like I think there's more resources than ever that organizations are putting out there for employees, but they're not doing it. You know, if it's not assigned, it doesn't exist. So like we partner with LinkedIn Learning, you know, hoping that the repository of content there would make people love to learn, right? Well, if you don't have a culture of learning, which means you don't make it assigned, right, mandatory and worth something to them, they're not going to do it because they just don't care. Like there's thousands of courses on AI upskilling in LinkedIn, right? So the best people are, you know, hopefully you're going to take that and run with it. Like I want to learn about prompt generation, right? I want to learn about like how to leverage AI to make me better and then make my team better. Now, if I present that to my team, even if I build a curricula, you know, several curricula about it, and they don't do it, like, see ya sometimes, you know, you really got to have them jump on there and do it. And how do you hold them accountable? So more resources than ever, less attention span than ever. And I'm an ADHD monster. I'm all over the place, but
yeah,
if I get my mindset on something, I'm going to go do it because I want to be successful. I want our org to be successful.
Chris, I'm a guy that my squirrels have squirrels, so I'm with you on that.
Thanks, Deb.
The thing that I see, we just finished some research on learning, and I'll send you that because there's some good stuff in there related to exactly what you're talking about. Availability doesn't necessarily solve the problem of getting people to build skills. It's the culture has to be one of autonomy and of opportunity, both to create that learning culture people really want to get in. And it ties back to the recruiting conversation that we're all here to facilitate. We see in the data that about 7 or 8 out of every 10 candidates say, I want to hear about what your plans you have for me during the hiring process. I'm using that to decide if I want your company or another company, because that's a factor that's more and more they're using as a mechanism to make a choice. So if you're not sharing those things, if that's not part of the conversation, it should be. I think Bill, when I was on here a while back, I talked about candidates wanting transparency. It's not just pay. It's opportunities. It's what's the culture like? What values do you have? What's the hiring process like? Don't surprise me after the 3rd conversation that there's 2 more interviews. Don't surprise me. I need to know that in advance. So making those things clear and transparent, including, Chris, the development opportunities, how we're going to grow you. Here's an example of where Joel was when he started here and where he is 2 years later. You know, giving some paths and visibility there is really, really powerful.
Absolutely. Meredith, I'm going to get to your question in just a second, but Nicole had her hand up, so I wanted to start with her. I think you may be on mute, Nicole. Get anyone else here, Nicole?
No, but we're all super excited for it.
I don't see her.
building a
I
lot
don't
of
see her like
anticipation.
talking.
I'm
Is she
very
talking and
excited
nothing's
now.
coming out? Is she trying to talk, Bill? I can't see her on my screen.
I think she is. I think it might be a microphone issue. So, Nicole, try and figure out your microphone. And I'm going to move back to Meredith really quickly, and then we'll come back to you. So Meredith asked to Ted Lasso, head coach of the AFC Richmond.
Yeah.
Can you share the information on learning with the entire group? So you've referenced some of that stuff. Maybe talk a little bit more in depth of what it is and maybe how people could go get it themselves.
Yeah, so I was trying to find the link really quickly while we were paused there, trying to find it. I'll get that link so I can get it to you to share out. One of the other things, I talked about the opportunity and the autonomy, the 2 things that set that apart. I think, Chris, you said you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. One of my very best friends in the world of learning says, yeah, but how can I make them thirsty? And that's the thing that we need to keep in mind is how can we make someone really want these things. And part of it is casting that vision for what the future looks like. In the research, we see that the ways that people prefer to learn are different based on their age. Shocker. Probably no surprise to anybody here. But we see that when it comes to work-related learning, video content is number one if you are a millennial or Gen Z. If you're not, then they prefer other types of content that are a little more static, but are something to them that seems more trustworthy. Like YouTube, as an example, has a big following, but it's not number one for every single person. So just knowing what people are looking for and how they're trying to access content and all those sorts of things, that does matter. The other part you mentioned was mandatory. There's this weird thing where we assume that if I tell them to do it, I make them do it, the content they consume is going to make them better at their job. And if they choose it themselves, they're just like freewheeling, picking content they care about. It'll make them happy, but it may not affect their performance. And I think that's a false choice. I think they can both be true. We can give them content that makes them both great. We can let them pick content that increases their skills, helps the business, all those good things. So there's so much there on the learning side. We could have an entire hour just on the learning side of that and how TA fits in. Because I was talking to a friend of mine, she's a VP of talent acquisition for a logistics company the other day. And I said, how are y'all thinking about this stuff? She said, well, we're not in charge of content and learning, but we are in charge of, hey, I see that Janice over there is doing really, really well. She's been here for about a year and a half. What other opportunities do we have here that we can make sure Janice knows are available so that we don't lose her if someone calls her from across the street at the competition? And we don't control those things in TA, but we do have the opportunity to influence that or create a culture where mobility is celebrated and appreciated, not penalized and punished. So there's a couple things like that we can do to lean in there and have a better outcome for our people, make them more excited about what we have available within the company, even without having to step outside your bounds of the TA function.
No, makes sense. Nicole, did you have any access with your audio?
Yay, it worked. Okay.
All right, there we go.
So what I was going to say was that our organization actually has some services that we use. You talked about scheduling earlier. We use those services so that we don't have to do them individually, or our coordinators don't have to do them individually. However, what we also find is that a lot of people will comment on the fact that when they contact us, we're one of the few organizations where healthcare where they actually get like a live person on the phone. And that, the communication through the systems and the auto-generated letters, which we also have, and the notifications can be overwhelming, especially for job seekers who are applying for multiple positions on a daily basis. To speak a little bit to the education point that you made earlier, we are looking, and a lot of questions that we get from candidates most recently, kind of coming out of COVID especially, is, what type of programs can you put me in? So what type of pathways do you have as an organization that will help me facilitate my education to move on within your organization? So this year for us, a lot of time was dedicated on our more entry-level positions and how can we give them the funds, the dollars to head back to school for an alternate program, right? Whether we have some where we pay them a stipend so that they don't have to work. They can work per diem. We'll pay them an annual stipend and we'll pay their college tuition for them to go to school for respiratory therapy or some other program that'll pathway them through. Where we lack is on the business side. We're great on the healthcare and the clinical side of things, but not so great on the business side. Most of the business areas, marketing, public relations, human resources, finance, there are no pathways for us. Nobody's interested in giving any of those groups programs to kind of pathway them through the organization. So that was it. Thanks for your patience too.
No, Nicole, that's a great observation. So my wife is in healthcare and was recently in the job market. Well, I had some people, and her experience with the different recruiting processes that she was put into was night and day. Like even surprised me, because obviously she knows I've done this for a while, and she keeps coming back and saying, hey, this just happened, or that just happened, or what do I do about this? Or he was supposed to call me and he didn't call me. That, and he or she, but that was probably the biggest thing that came out of her process was missed scheduled times to speak in that healthcare evaluation process as a nurse. So very interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I just want to know how many sales calls Nicole gets in healthcare.
Oh my God, please don't call me. So many of them. So many of them. Everybody. And you know what? It's funny because most of the calls are about how some sort of AI can help the system that we currently have. We just went live with the system that we have now. We spend half of our time trying to manage the things it's supposed to do versus time on the people. And that's where I get really leery about the AI piece of it. I think that it's great if it works. And I think it's great if it actually has a response that engages people and that at least masks some kind of personability with them. But when you spend half your day trying to figure out why something didn't do what it was supposed to do in a system, you kind of don't have enough time to dedicate to the thing that you really like to do, right? And the thing that you should be doing.
I want to apologize to Nicole because I advise quite a few startups and things are getting a little tight, and I'm telling them all to call healthcare. That's still the one, still got the money, still flowing. So I apologize.
It's okay, no worries.
Blame it on me.
Meredith, you get your hand up for a question.
Yeah. And I, oh, sorry. Can everyone hear me? I'll try to get my video going too.
Yep, we can definitely hear you.
So I'm switching gears a little bit. And I guess I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about our future generation. Because earlier, Joel, I heard you say something about attention span and how people don't have a huge, and then I also heard, I think it was, Chat GPT is showing that when we use it, we're less creative. So I'm thinking about all these things that my teen or the future generation of workforce are using and how, oh shit, like they don't have an attention span. They are not creative, or if they're using these tools consistently, aren't going to be creative. What things should we be doing to be thinking about and trying to help prepare this future generation of workforce that might be really savvy with these tools, but are going to need a lot more in other ways? And maybe what you shared, Ben, with the report would be helpful. There's tips in there. I did download it, just didn't read it yet. But thoughts of like this future generation of workforce, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned.
There's a lot of influencer wannabes out there. Like literally studies I've seen have over half of teens want to be an influencer.
Yes.
It's crazy.
I want to be a YouTube celebrity.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Only fan.
I can give you one more. Oh, that was totally worth it to get your video working, Meredith. Yes. So I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more rain cloud on the horizon, because just because you already added a couple there. So when we look at the research on why candidates say they accept the job and then don't show up on day one, the biggest, the thing that sticks out to me isn't the reasons, it's the fact that it's age correlated. So someone who's 25 is more likely than someone who is 45 to have done that. And they've only been in the professional workplace for 2 or 3 years, and they've already done it more often than someone else. And so if that snowball continues in the wrong direction for us, that's going to become a lot more common, where we're dealing with, okay, are they truly accepted? Well, accepted, show on day one, then show on day two. Okay, once they're here for 3 weeks, then we know they're really committed. That's the thing that concerns me long term, is part of that commitment, part of that responsiveness, the attention span, Joel, all of those things. That freaks me the heck out, for sure.
And you wonder why companies want to replace all the human beings, because human beings suck. We're awful. Robots show up. They don't have days off. They don't ghost you. Anyway.
Goodness. So your answer to that, so here's what I'll tell you. When I'm talking about I call it the career cliff, the concerns that I have with people using the tools like ChatGPT and others to do part of their work. When any of us that have done time in TA, it's not really prison, but we spent time in TA. If we've done that, you started out with maybe the scheduling, and then you got into, hey, I need you to update this job description. We're going to get it posted out there as an ad, not a description. So take out all the company stuff, and you do all those little nuts and bolts things and learn how that works. So when it comes time to negotiate with that candidate and get them to say yes when you've been pursuing them for a few months for this key role, you can get them to say yes. You built up that ladder of skills, and then you were able to use that top level skill because you built to it. But if you use ChatGPT to answer all the questions down there, when it comes time for the interaction, you're like, hold on, let me ask my AI tool to get the answer and know how to, no, that's weird. And it's not going to happen. The answer to that is spending more time with mentors, spending more time intentionally with coaching, spending more time thinking about how can we detach people from tools and spend more time with people, learning from and communicating with each other. Someone mentioned return to office mandates. Like it or not, there's a cost to innovation when people are separate. We don't have that casual innovation where I bump into Joel in the hallway and he's like, hey, I've got an idea. Do you have a minute? And we come up with the next best indeed, Joel. The next better indeed. How about that? So we come up with something like that. Yes, let's do it. But those things don't happen when you're remote because you're like, hey, Joel, do you have time in your calendar? Okay, 2 weeks from now, let's chat. And then by then it feels very artificial and doesn't have that same serendipity to it. So that's one of the things that I come back to is those things, again, like them or not, that does have a challenge built into it. So we should spend more time unstructured with people. In our copious free time we have at work, more unstructured time with people, whether they're our leaders, they're our teammates, and spending more time on those things, that does matter. The other part, we could go down all these rabbit holes of like the data show that we're not producing enough people to keep our population up. We've kept it steady over the last few years as a country because we're importing people from everywhere else that Joel talked about earlier. All these other countries are sending us people because we will bring them in to keep our population steady. But there's a time where they're going to stop sending people because they need them there. Japan won't outsource anybody because they don't have enough people working age to support their Social Security age people. They don't have enough physical people there. And so those sorts of things create it. Again, it's not going to get easier, but we do have to actually solve for it. And the data show that we're great at solving things. If your house is on fire, you know immediately what to do. But if I said your house is going to be on fire at some point in the future, and you may want to think about that, you're like, I'll worry about it when it comes. We're not good at responding to these long frame problems. And I think you pointed to that, Joel, earlier when you said some of the things you were talking about earlier on that front. So I don't know what the answer is necessarily to it, but Meredith, it's a real point. It's a serious point. And thank you for making us all feel a little bit worse today. We appreciate you.
The costume was a little sugar with the medicine, though. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Well, and Amy, Amy just made a great mention in the comments that where AI can help is taking some of these people with minimal potential and losing their job because of a job going away, i.e. 200 schedulers from your story about GM and AI helping them reskill themselves, which is really interesting. Oh, and I just noticed Jerry has a question. So Jerry, the floor is yours. I didn't see your hand up there.
That's okay. Hey, thanks, Bill. Actually, it's not a question. It's actually a comment. It's actually an idea. Earlier, and it's tying into Meredith, as she's like, I'm really worried about, the future of, the job market and, who's going to be working, who's going to be running this country. And then when we first started, with AI and, the recruiting jobs getting minimal, I just thought of I actually had this idea for a while in regards to what our next role can be. We actually can turn it around and be job coaches and employment specialists for all these people that do not know how to interview or what skills or have low communication or interpersonal skills, just due to them texting or being on social media and not having real life interaction, because we know what the hiring managers are looking for. We know what the answers that they need to give during an interview. And, I think this could be our next potential career move.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of all the big companies like EY and others. After people started coming back to the office and they realized that all these students who finished college virtually, who had never actually sat and talked to someone face to face before, couldn't do it in the real world. And they had to go through these remedial training classes of here's how you talk to a person at work. And this is an appropriate way to respond. And things that we take completely for granted, they had to start from scratch because they had they finished their school all virtually and never had a chance to get out there never actually got out there. I don't say they hadn't had a chance, because we always have a chance, but they never actually got out there and spent any time with anyone.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. Um,
By the
we
way,
have about
that's,
three. Oh, go ahead, Joel.
that's making RTO very challenging. Korn Ferry released a survey this week about sort of trends for 2025, and 64% of people like will not interview with a company or even look at a company if they have office work. And to Ben's point, the more people we churn out that are on like live on a screen, the getting them into an office is going to continually get harder and harder and harder. And if you're a company not figuring out, even hybrid is becoming sort of like, I'm not even interested in that.
Yeah.
If you're not figuring out remote work and how to do your business remotely, man, you are at a disadvantage long term.
Yeah, the performance of a job posting with and without remote, hybrid, in office is staggering. That's
Yeah.
just a tell-all right there. When I see those numbers come out, it blows my mind that that simple word remote will quadruple the performance of that in the market of people being interested.
Yeah.
Because personally, I like going to an office.
You're an old white
Weirdo.
Yeah. But for those you don't know, the bottom half of me is in a large metal brace from a knee surgery yesterday. So I'm not going to an office. I'm remote for the next 2 weeks at least. Much to my children's chagrin that they can't come home and have the house to themselves, which is brings Halloween to another level for them. So well, guys, I really appreciate everyone's time. We're wrapping up on the last couple minutes of the show. We were going to select a costume winner, and so I would ask each of you if there's somebody that you think had pulled off the best costume, just drop it in chat. And Greg, fixing yours is not going to help. Yeah, I was going to go with Buddy the Elf as well, because that's my all-time favorite Halloween costume. And oh, Norm got a vote. Look at that. But everyone, thank you very much. I think this was a great discussion. I think we really explored a couple of areas that were really interesting to me. The future of work and the future of people's ability to bring that creative intelligence to work based on the tools that are challenging them today, especially with our kids, is a great concern of mine. So everybody, Lauren, Joel, Lauren just asked if you could drop the Korn Ferry research into chat. I don't know if you have that readily available.
Yeah, give me 10 seconds.
We can use AI.
It is searchable, but I'll
and a great conversation. On a quick side note, if anybody is in the New York chapter, we're having a great event on the 14th at the Hearst Tower. There's a couple members of the talk community speaking on a panel, and it could be a really fun night. We're way up in the Hearst building overlooking, I think, Central Park. So it'll be a really fun night, and it's on November 14th. The details can be found under events on our site. And if you can make it, that'd be great. And again, everybody, thank you very much. You find it yet, Joe? There it is.
There you go. Beautiful.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you again. Have a wonderful Halloween. Hope for those with kids, I hope they all have a wonderful experience. I know here in the Northeast, being 80 degrees will be quite interesting. And everyone have a great day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Bill.